This is Kirby and the Forgotten Land for the Nintendo Switch, and it's the first Kirby title to make the jump from a 2D side-scroller to a full-on 3D platformer. It's full of levels that are packed with secrets to discover, hidden items to collect, and in-game lore that tells a darker, more human story than anything we've ever seen in a Kirby title. It's been a few weeks since Forgotten Land released, and the critical reception has been very positive, with many critics calling it the best game in the Kirby series, which is a claim that I personally agree with. But what you may not know is how they did it, how they managed to strike a near-perfect balance between being accessible for new players while offering challenge, mystery, and rewards for more experienced players. So how did they pull it off? Well, if you ask me, the secret to Forgotten Land's success comes not from how the game plays, but rather how the game ends. Because Kirby and the Forgotten Land has not one or two, but 4 potential endings for players to discover, and I believe that each of these endings were designed with a different type of player in mind. And so today we will be breaking down what each of these 4 endings are and what type of player they were designed for. And if any of this sounds familiar to you, well, you'd be right. Welcome to Another Ending, the series where we explore the many ways video games come to an end and discover how the end is often just the beginning. And today we will be exploring the post-apocalyptic endings of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Kirby and the Forgotten Land opens on a sunny day on planet Popstar, the home of our pink hero. Of course, this is a Nintendo-published title, and so Kirby, who is just out for a morning stroll, is ripped away from his home by a devastating dark vortex. When Kirby wakes up, he finds himself in a completely new world, and he soon discovers that he was not the only one who took the wormhole to work this morning, as we see Waddle Dees being captured and thrown in cages by the wildlife who inhabit this new world. After a skirmish with some locals, Kirby meets Elfin. Elfilin. You know, the dude with the ears. And he explains that the Waddle Dees managed to build an entire town to try and settle and survive in this new world, but they were eventually overrun by the fearsome Beast Pack, a group of powerful and dangerous animals from the new world. Kirby and his new sidekick team up and set off to rescue the rest of the Waddle Dees, and our adventure is officially underway. As we explore this new world, something immediately feels off. The world in which we find Kirby is like nothing we've seen before in a Kirby title. This new world resembles the real world, not planet Popstar. It's a place that was seemingly shaped by humans, and yet no humans exist here. We discover a city that's been deserted and overtaken by nature. We explore an abandoned shopping mall that is somehow more depressing than a real-life American shopping mall. We even find Kirby on what I assume to be an oil drilling rig in the ocean that is located dangerously close to a family beach resort. The list goes on. This is a game where the environment around the character does the storytelling. There is a mystery here. What happened to the people who lived here? What caused them to disappear? And it's this environmental storytelling that sets the early game of Forgotten Land apart from other Kirby titles. Generally speaking, the first parts of Kirby games are pretty easy. And when a game is too easy or too casual, it can cause more experienced players to lose interest. That's why setting this game in a post-apocalyptic wasteland is such a brilliant idea for a Kirby game, because even though these first few levels were a breeze, I couldn't take my eyes off the world around me. I wanted to see where it would go next, and it kept me interested. And as Kirby continues to explore the Forgotten Land, he defeats the leaders of the Beast Pack one by one, saving the Waddle Dees, and eventually we find Kirby at the entrance of an abandoned research lab suspended over a volcano. When we enter the lab, a dark secret is revealed. We learn that a creature known as Forgo invaded this world 30 years ago. It was a creature capable of moving between dimensions in time and space. And though it nearly conquered this world, the humans who lived here managed to capture it and imprison it in this lab, where they performed experiments on it. They were trying to replicate the creature's interdimensional powers for themselves. This of course begs the question, Who was the real monster here, Fecto Forgo, or the scientist who tortured and experimented on it for years? It's probably the monster, but you get the idea. Eventually, the scientists were successful. They were able to replicate Fecto Forgo's power and open a passage between dimensions. And with their newfound power, the people living here decided to leave their home and travel to a land of dreams. When they left this dimension, they left Fecto Forgo to rot in a cage, and they left behind the animals who eventually claimed this world for their own. We learned that the creature used its psychic abilities to control the animals left behind to resume its invasion of this world, and theoretically, find those humans who imprisoned it and exact some revenge. Kirby, of course, won't stand for this and fights the creature to save both the Forgotten Land and his own planet Popstar. And once this battle is over, you will reach the first ending of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, or what I like to call the ending of the Hungry Hero. To be a hungry hero, you must complete every level in Forgotten Land's main campaign and defeat Fecto Elfilis at the top of Lab Discovera. When we do so, we reach the game's end credits for the first time, and we get a nice resolution to our story. And there are a handful of new activities for Kirby to enjoy back in Waddle Dee Town as his reward. The ending of the Hungry Hero was designed to be reached by the highest number of players. You don't need to save every Waddle Dee in the game, just enough to help you get from one world to the next. Besides, they all have the same name and look identical, so no one will notice that you left a few dozen locked in cages. This first ending is a very important one because it was designed to be accessible to newer players. The last few levels of the main game do include quite a few boss battles, but players are given the choice to purchase power-ups that make these boss fights much more manageable. And for the final battle, Kirby's given the choice of any copy ability in the game, and some of these abilities make that final fight much easier than others. These design choices are deliberate. They allow the first ending to be reached by players of any skill level, while allowing more experienced players to skip those optional upgrades and make the final boss a bit more of a challenge. Back in Waddle Dee Town, things are pretty chill. The members of the previously evil Beast Pack are now cool with Kirby, and everyone in town is having a pretty good time, going to the movie theater, listening to live music, watching violent gladiatorial combat in the Coliseum, really chill vibes. But it's not all paradise. If we pay attention to the end credits, we can see that Fecto Elfilis has not been fully defeated. A piece of that creature is still out there, and we eventually learn that Leongar? The Lion Man, the leader of the Beast Pack, has been lost in an alternate dimension created by the monster. Despite never having really met this Lion Man in his life, Kirby risks it all and dives headfirst into another vortex to save the lion. On the other side of the vortex, we discover the world of Forgo Dreams. It's an alternate dimension filled with the memories of the Forgotten Land and the Beast Pack. From a game design perspective, these levels are remixed versions of levels we've already played, but with much more enemies on screen at any given time, and much more demanding platforming and puzzle sections. These levels are also quite long compared to their originals, and all of them end in a pretty challenging boss fight. I should mention that we are technically here to collect the pieces of the Lion Man's soul, but all you really need to know is that Forgo Dreams is like a hidden final world. It's where this Kirby title gets more and more challenging. If you are able to overcome all of the trials and battles of Forgo Dreams, you will find yourself once again at Lab Discovera. But since this is an alternate dimension, this final boss fight plays out a bit differently. First, we face Forgo Leongar, who is once again possessed by the monster, but once he's defeated, things start to get interesting. By chance, a red butterfly flies into the lab and crosses the path of Forgo, who absorbs the creature, fusing his power with the form of the butterfly. The resulting creature is known as Morpho Knight, and this battle is easily one of the game's best. Veterans of the Kirby series will know that anytime we face off against Meta Knight or some Meta Knight-like enemy, you are in for a pretty good time. Unless you're playing against Meta Knight in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, in which case you are in for a really bad time. But in Forgotten Land, this Morpho Knight battle is like a reward. It's for the players who push through the levels of Forgo Dreams. It's a surprise from the creators of the Kirby series for the dedicated players to discover. And if you're successful in defeating Morpho Knight, you will reach the second ending of the game, or what I like to call the ending of the Dream Knight. To be a Dream Knight, you must complete all of the challenges and boss battles within Forgo Dreams, and if you're successful, you will save Leongar and reach the game's end credits for a second time. The ending of the Dream Knight was designed to give more experienced players a challenge, much like the original Kirby's unlockable hard mode. To reach this second ending requires players to survive some pretty difficult levels by the Kirby series standards, and many of these final boss encounters forced me to pay attention to my health bar and wait for an opening to attack. I couldn't just breeze through it, and that's exactly what I was hoping for. The ending of the Dream Knight is a worthy one because it features some of the best platforming sequences and boss encounters that the Kirby series has ever seen. This second ending would be a very reasonable place for any player to stop playing. To me, an ending in a game is any point where the developers intended for the player to stop playing, and they usually signal this to the player through things like end credits or by returning the player to the main menu. At this point in the game, we've already passed through 2 of these stopping points, or 2 potential endings. But as you may have already guessed, there is more for us to uncover here. Once again, the setup comes from the end credit sequence. It's a blink and you miss it teaser, but during the second credit sequence, we see a ghostly form of Fecto visible on screen. And it seems like this creature is headed to the Coliseum in Waddle Dee Town. This teaser is just enough to keep dedicated players interested. And so Kirby heads back to town to head to the Coliseum to follow the creature. What awaits us is the Ultimate Cup Z, a boss rush challenge featuring all of the harder boss fights from Forgo Dreams. Only this time around, the challenge will be even greater, because unlike the other Coliseum battles, the Ultimate Cup Z offers no maximum tomatoes between battles, so healing and recovering health is incredibly limited. Making things even more challenging is that this boss rush also features 2 new encounters. First, we face off against Phantom Meta Knight, which is basically the same as fighting regular Meta Knight, except this one hits harder and works at a Spirit Halloween store. After a few more rounds through this boss rush, we find ourselves at Kirby and the Forgotten Land's final combat challenge, and the most difficult boss fight in the game, Chaos Elphalus. At first, the fight seems very similar to our first encounter with this creature, but as you may have already guessed by the color swap, this version hits much harder and gives Kirby much less time to react between attacks. Eventually, the creature reveals its final form, a horrifying glowing ball that generates black holes and tries to consume everything. This final endgame boss battle can be a challenge, and I found it difficult enough that I actually needed to learn how to use Kirby's dodge mechanics. You see, Kirby can dodge incoming attacks at the very last moment, which slows down time and gives the player more of a chance to mount a counterattack. And I find it fascinating that I had this dodge mechanic available to me the entire game, and yet this final boss encounter was the first time where I felt like I actually needed to use it. It's just another example of how this game was smartly designed for players of all skill levels. And if you are successful in defeating Chaos Elphalus, you will reach the 3rd ending of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, or what I like to call the ending of the Chaos Conqueror. To be a Chaos Conqueror, you must do what the title suggests. Defeat Chaos Elphalus, which is the most difficult boss fight in the game. You may be wondering what separates the 2nd and 3rd ending. Why does completing an endgame challenge in the Coliseum qualify as a new ending? Well, I'm glad you asked. The final Coliseum challenge is very much tied to the game's main story. Remember our little green friend with the ears? Well, it turns out he was created when an experiment on Fecto Forgo went south. He and the monster are 2 parts of the same entity. And it isn't until this final battle with Chaos Elphalus where we see them become one again. We've beaten this monster at least 3 times, but only now is the threat actually over, making this moment at the end of the Ultimate Cup Z its own unique ending. From a game design perspective, putting a final cutscene at the end of a difficult boss rush makes a lot of sense. It gives more skilled players a chance to put all of their upgraded abilities to use, or, if you're a scrub like me, a chance to finally master those dodge mechanics. The ending of the Chaos Conqueror is here for players who want to face every challenge the game has to offer. And in my opinion, it is the closest thing that Kirby in the Forgotten Land has to a true ending. because the conflict between Kirby and the interdimensional monster who abducted him from his home is finally at an end. I think this third ending is probably the stopping point that would satisfy most of the dedicated players out there. After all, we've now faced the greatest combat test this game has, and we've seen every world and every level in the game. And yet, something is keeping me here. Something is keeping Kirby up at night. Ah, completion percentage, my old friend. See, even though we've bested each and every challenge the game has for us, we are faced with a crushing realization that we've not 100% completed the game. For many game franchises, this would be a non-issue, but this is a Kirby game, and what does Kirby do? Kirby consumes everything. He inhales his enemies, he swallows cars and vending machines. And what did the creature in the lab want? To consume this world and others like it. And most importantly, what happened to the people living in the Forgotten Lands? Well, they consumed everything. They created massive corporations which consumed all of the natural resources of the world, eventually causing a climate crisis and made this world unlivable. I legitimately cannot believe I am saying this, but the meta-narrative of the Forgotten Land feels like a cautionary tale of what can happen if human consumption goes unchecked. And if we've learned anything from the bigger themes of this story, it's that there's no problem with putting the controller down now and moving on. But should you choose to ignore this lesson and continue to inhale and collect everything you can, there is a fourth and final ending for you to discover: the ending of the Golden Void. To reach the fourth and final ending of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, you must reach 100% completion on your file. To do so requires us to find every item and check every optional box in the game. Some of the highlights include rescuing all 300 Waddle Dees, complete every Treasure Road stage, collect 300 pieces of the Lion Man's soul, gamble at a casino and successfully beat the house, collect all 256 Gacha Machine figures, work 3 shifts at a restaurant, donate to local musicians, catch a fish so big that you'll make your grandfather proud. The list goes on, but you get the idea. To reach 100% completion, you're going to have to perform all the tasks that were once optional. And the further we go, the weaker the rewards become. After all, what good are more coins if you've got nothing to spend them on? What does Kirby get for all of his hard work? Well, if you've seen my video on Breath of the Wild, or if you've played a few Kirby games, you probably know what comes next. For all of your hard work, you receive a JPEG, an image that says, "Congratulations" from the developers for all of that hard work. If this reward feels underwhelming to you, it's okay, because that's entirely the point. Kirby's journey has long been over. We're just chasing that 100% completion percentage. And while Kirby's story in this game is your classic hero in an unfamiliar land saves the day type thing, the larger, more abstract narrative of Kirby and the Forgotten Land is about consumption and the dangers that come with consuming too much. With that in mind, how does a game designer reward a player who spends all of their coins on gacha machines? How do you reward a player who catches every fish in the pond? How do you reward a player for consuming everything? The answer is, you can't. This fourth and final ending may seem disappointing, but I believe that is the point. I see it as an acknowledgement from the creators to the players that your work here is finally done. But it also serves to remind us of the themes of Forgotten Land, a reminder to enjoy what we have and to try to make it last. Because once we do everything in this game and hit that 100% completion, there is nothing left for us in this world. This is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. It's one of the strongest Kirby titles ever created, and it's among the best games on the Switch. It's a game that stays true to the original mission of the franchise, to invite new players in, but also give experienced players a challenge to discover and overcome. And I believe the key to pulling this off was designing the game around multiple endings, each designated for a different type of player, from newcomers to completionists. Kirby games have always featured more than one ending, but in Forgotten Lands, this idea becomes the centerpiece of its design. And I for one hope we see more Kirby games just like this one in the future. Thank you all so much for watching and coming on this journey with me. Be sure to let me know which of the endings you reached in the comments below. My name is NIKMOE, and it's good to be back. I'll see you all again very soon.